StoryHinge, Episode 89, Nigel Vardy, Adventure.
And if the author can give you something of what it feels both mentally and physically to go through that, and their emotional attachment to it, then they've got a really good story coming on. I prefer adventure stories because that's my thing. But I think what they sometimes are, it's a bit like a roller coaster for the reader. You can sort of lift their heart and then drop it again, lift their heart and drop it again. You can take them to places they may wish to go, they may wish not to go. You can take them to places they want to actually now go to because you've told them about it. And you can enthuse people about where you've been or where you've travelled. But I say you can also put people completely off, or it's just, I want to read about it because I know I'll never go there. And stories allow people to do those journeys in their own minds. And I think that's incredibly powerful.
Welcome to StoryHinge. At StoryHinge, we explore foundational ideas and beliefs. We believe everyone has a beautiful story to grow. Now here's your host, Jason Vidaurri.
Welcome to StoryHinge. Hope everyone out there is having a great day. Today we're going to be spending some time hearing about adventure and the intersection of adventure and story. And we're going to do that with our guest today, Nigel Vardy. He's been referred to as Mr. Frostbite. We're going to hear about that story, among other adventures, and the intersection of that with story itself. And he's also used a lot of his learning that he's had on these adventures into teaching and sharing with others those lessons he's learned. So with that, welcome to StoryHinge, Nigel. And why don't we first get started with 1999 on Mount McKinley and hear where that adventure takes us.
Well, it was certainly adventure, I'll give it that. I came over to Alaska from the UK with two friends to climb Mount McKinley. We're mountaineers, that's what we do. And it went fantastically well until, of course, the last day on the mountain, where we had an absolute epic. And we got stuck in tremendously bad weather, high winds, minus 60 centigrade air temperatures. And you suddenly realize that no matter how tough and strong you might think you are, you're a very small dot in a very large landscape. And we were benighted or spent a night on the top of the mountain at 6,000 meters, and we basically nearly froze to death. We were very fortunate to be airlifted off the next day by sending out emergency messages. We're all issued with radios and beacons. But they broke altitude records. The pilot actually broke a high altitude record to come and get us off because nobody had ever pushed themselves that far to do it. And one by one, we were taken off the top of the mountain, all with extreme frostbite. One guy with broken bones as well. And that was, the end to a wonderful adventure on the mountain and the start of another adventure in not just learning how to work with yourself on the hills, but of course learning how to work with yourself through injury and recovery. And it made me understand some very important things in life about time, about what's important, what it's like to be with people, support each other through very difficult times. Because we can all laugh about the good times. It's the bad times, the difficult times, the tough times that make us think and make us work.
Let me take you back a little bit to being up on the mountain there. So you're having this great adventure and then things turn. How does that, if you could take us to that time and when things started to turn, and did you notice it? Did it creep up on you guys? How did you, because you're always managing risk up there in an adventure. And how did it become, this risk is more than we want to be dealing with?
Well, we're on the summit day, so you make your camps as high as you can. You go for the mountain quite light in equipment. We don't take a load of gear with us. We move as fast as we can to the summit. And we climbed onto what's called the football field, the summit plateau. And it was there the weather came in. And McKinley's known for these very, very fast coming in weather systems, an hour, half an hour. They come piling in, and that's exactly what happened. And you have to realize you're in a position where you can't just walk off or go in your house or just say, right, we've had enough, guys, that'll do, turn it off. You're stuck there. And the three of us were stuck in weather that came from practically nowhere. And it went from being a reasonable day to a howling gale. And you suddenly realize that you can't get out of that wind. And that's what's freezing you to death. the three of you are going to have to work as hard as you've ever worked in your entire lives, and there's nowhere to hide. McKinley's a very flat-topped, open peak, hence they call it the football field. It's so flat. And you can't just hide round a corner, get round a rock. There's nothing to get away from the weather from, and that was the killer. You've got to find somewhere to get out the weather, which eventually we did. We cut a hole out of a piece of ice and snow that was coming off the summit peak, a bit like a crevasse, and we got ourselves and spent the night actually inside it under the ice, which sounds freezing cold, but it was a lot warmer than being outside in the wind. And there we could take some decisions, which is what we had to do, which ultimately saved our lives.
Okay. And as you're in that, I mean, are you realizing the seriousness of the situation right away? Is it? I'm kind of just wondering, internally, what are you going through?
You work in a very unusual world. You're very cold, so your cognitive reactions are very slow. You don't think as quick as we could do now. But also, you start working on short-term goals. We certainly weren't dwelling on, are we going to die? Is this the end? How will they ever find us? What will I ever tell my family? What you start dealing with is you fill your mind with short-term goals. What's going to happen in the next 10 minutes? Can we make the situation better? And we were in this thing for, I'm taking a guess now, 10, 12 hours. You do all kinds of thinking to improve the situation. But I've been asked a number of times, did you ever think you were going to die? And the answer is no. And I'm quite glad of that. Because I think if you get down that avenue, then it's a very slippery slope.
Okay.
And, three of us just hugged as close as we could, kept as warm as we could, told sorts of silly jokes, tried to keep awake. And the hours very slowly passed.
Okay. So take us a little bit further down the road here. How that, you said you started getting rescued the day later or a couple of days later? How?
Yeah, a day later. We took a decision that as the sun came up the next morning, because obviously the nights are quite short in late May in Alaska, that we had to do something. And one guy with me, Steve, was very hypothermic in a very, very bad way. And we took a decision that we really need to get a message out to the ranger base and the rescue services just so they're aware of the situation. And that was an old CB radios were issued in those days. You expect some kind of modern setup. It's a few years back now. So I stick my head out into the storm with this little handheld radio in the vain hope I can get a message to base camp. And miraculously I did. But then I had to get back in the crevasse because it was early morning. It was still horrible out there. But this message started an enormous rescue attempt. And we had no idea about this. We're 2 miles above them. There's all kinds of things happening, people being torn out of tents, people asking where the three English guys. This went on for a long time. And we just got back in the crevasse. The rescue services said, wait till early morning. We'll put an aircraft up. We'll try and spot for you and see where you are. But that's no good if you're in a hole. So we've got to get out. We've got to get on top. We did. The weather was better. I'm not going to say it was good, but it was better. And we took the decision that, we got ourselves in this mess. We should get ourselves out of it. And we tried to walk back to our original camp and at least, sort our lives out. And it was there, it became very apparent I was severely frostbitten. And both the feet, hands, neither of those were working. And my left eye was very inflamed and not working, so I couldn't see properly either. So walking off the mountain sounds easy, but it was a nightmare. And I was falling over every few steps. We had a terrible time in the wind trying to manage each other. I was falling over all the time. And by the time what you and me would get out and walk now in 10 minutes took hours. And we just took a decision, this is going nowhere. And the two other guys decided that one of them would go for help, one would stay with me. And that's what happened. The guy that went for help was unfortunately very seriously injured. And the guy that stayed with me, Anthony, with myself, was rescued by helicopter again a number of hours later, probably very much later that evening. And Steve, the guy who went for help, spent another night out there. He fell and broke his legs, tragically, but was recovered alive the next day. And then we're all flown down to Anchorage.
Okay. You know, I can hear someone saying that, or hearing this story and saying, that seems crazy to put yourself in this kind of place where these things kind of happen. I can understand the adventure of it perhaps, but is it too risky? Is there too much life on the line? How do you respond to maybe a question along those lines?
I don't think it's too risky. I mean, things go wrong wherever we are in the world. And over in Britain at the minute, I've been seeing things, people being killed on cycles in the street. Things like this happen. We choose to go into environments that are different to most people's expectations, like people who go deep water soloing or diving to great depths. Everything works beautifully until something goes wrong, and then it tends to go wrong in a bigger way than you would expect. And that's the thing that people hear about. Mm-hmm. People don't hear about the multiple thousands of ascents of mountains or places people go where nothing goes wrong. One thing goes wrong, the press get hold of it, and it's the only story people read. Ask anybody to read an adventure book on mountaineering or bashing through jungles or diving to great depths, and they want the stories, usually with a bit of disaster in them.
Yeah. And so the end result for you, I guess, physically, how did this turn out?
Well, I lost all my toes, the backs of both heels on my feet. I mean, my hands are quite obvious. I've lost all my fingertips down to the first knuckle. The left-hand side of my face, a big chunk fell away. My nose fell off as well. But other than that, the rest of it survived.
And after this, you're thinking about the next adventure? Are you thinking, well, not again, or?
Well, I was actually thinking about the next adventure before I could walk. I found it to be the best way to channel my fear and to channel my drive. Like anybody in the situation, it all sounds, you're going to be okay. The doctors tell you you're going to be fine, but they're going to cut your fingers off and they're going to cut your toes off. And that's a journey into the unknown. Absolute journey into the unknown. All your family want you to give it up tomorrow and take up gardening or flower. And yet some of us are built differently. Some of us are built that we want to go out and do different things. And all I wanted to do was to get back on a mountain. I wanted to do it tomorrow. It took over 2 years because I had to learn to walk. Yeah. I had to learn to use my hands. But I found it the best way to channel, particularly stress and depression. I went through a very, very bad time. And I think having that desire I will get back on that hill one day was one of the things that kept me going.
Okay. And so I'm still curious on how, you mentioned it somewhat already, what that adventure does for you. It gives you, challenge those fears in yourself. Why adventure? Why doing these adventures?
I think it's what I do. We all have what we do. We all have something that excites us. Don't think we're all adrenaline junkies that we go and do things that we know are outrageously dangerous. You'll probably find mountaineers are actually quite the opposite. We're incredibly risk conscious, but not completely risk averse. We understand the situation. But it's what I channel my life through, and it's what gives me purpose, and it's what drives me every day. When I wake up, it is, what am I doing? What am I considering? I don't do sitting down very well. I don't do watching box sets very well or long movies. What I want to do is travel, to move, to see, to learn, and that's what adventure gives me.
Great. Now, some of my desire to talk with you is to hear how that adventure ties into our story. Now, I understand that you also wrote about these adventures, and it's not this one. You've had more than this, I know.
Yes. Yeah.
What is the writing process, or turning that adventure story into an actual written down form? What does that do for you? Is it?
Well, firstly, it was a great help in actually releasing the story out of my own mind, because it's very hard. You bottle up a lot of emotion, you bottle up a lot of pain, a lot of there's a lot going on in your mind, and you want to get rid of it somehow, release it somehow, let it go. Speaking was one way, and writing was another. But I've also written since I was a child. I've written a diary every day since I was a teenager, and I've never stopped. So initially in hospital, when I got the use of my hands back, I started writing my diaries again. And then they gave me some work into a book. And I thought, well, why don't I write this story down and do something positive with it? And not just have this is a story about a guy in a mountain. There was some, messages in there about how to change life, how to do more positive things, how to get over very difficult times in your life, both for the reader and for myself actually as the author. And it was a great moment, really, to have your own book published about something you've achieved. It's a real story. It's not a fictional account.
Yeah.
And I just enjoyed writing. I've always enjoyed writing. Always enjoyed writing. And it gives me that release. It gives me a purpose.
Okay. Now, I think I've heard you maybe on one of the other videos or some of your bio or other parts saying that, I don't know if it's exactly that you said that this was a blessing per se, but that this moment in your life was, I don't know, does it catapult you to other things, or what came out of this?
Well, it was a damn good kick up the backside, I think, to be honest. People do find it odd, what was the greatest thing about frostbite? And for me, it was getting it, because it made me learn very, very quickly what's important, what works, where to change or challenge my life. And I was 30, I was drifting, I was wandering around a little bit. And believe me, I'd rather not lose my fingers and toes to an accident. But sometimes we need something to make us drive ourselves. And there's a great many people who go through a life-changing experience find that. And for me, it was the frostbite. And so it made me understand at 30 what was and wasn't important, what I wanted to get out of my life, and how I was going to achieve that. But obviously, I'd wished that I could have learned that without having the accident. But that's the way life is sometimes. You're dealt a lesson, and sometimes the lessons are very hard.
And Nigel, maybe I want to hear some of your thoughts on story itself and what you've learned about story by having these old adventure stories yourself. I mean, what makes a story a good story?
I always think that it's got to have plenty of what you would call meat on the bones. It's got to have plenty of, for me, excitement, but also description. But it's also, in my view, got to be real. I always enjoy non-fiction books or stories because somebody's actually lived through them. And if the author can give you something of what it feels both mentally and physically to go through that, and their emotional attachment to it, then they've got a really good story coming on. I prefer adventure stories because that's my thing. Mm-hmm. But I think what they sometimes are, it's a bit like a roller coaster for the reader. You can sort of lift their heart and then drop it again, lift their heart and drop it again. You can take them to places they may wish to go, they may wish not to go. You can take them to places they want to actually now go to because you've told them about it. And you can enthuse people about where you've been or where you've travelled. But say you can also put people completely off, or it's just, I want to read about it because I know I'll never go there. And stories allow people to do those journeys in their own minds. And I think that's incredibly powerful. And then they can choose to say, actually, I'm so excited about what I've read here. Why don't I go and see it for myself?
Yeah. How has your own story affected other people? Because like you said, you do speaking, you also written it. Have you been able to witness the receiving side of your story and seen how?
Yeah, I mean, only this last week I was speaking at an outdoor event, and a number of people have written to me afterwards just saying thank you. And not just thank you, it's a great story, it was fun or whatever, but thank you because I've been going through a tough time, and it was just so nice to understand that I'm not on my own. Also, people that have suffered depression, again, you feel very isolated. You're not on your own. And sometimes people, we've got this strap line of adventurers that seems to be coming out lately this term, that it seems to have completely taken over the media. But, we do different things. And some other people I know who are mountaineers like myself have said, again, people just don't understand why I do it. Thank you for trying to explain it to them better than I can. And I don't know how good a job I do, but perhaps it's from a different perspective. But I get a lot of people speaking like that just because they see, again, somebody who actually goes and does it, rather than, here's a documentary film about something that's made, or go and have a chat afterwards and sit down, have coffee or a drink or whatever, and just share things with people. I'm very into that, and lots of people appreciate that as well.
What would you say to someone kind of in their exploring area?
I started going into the outdoors very young, 5, 6 years old. I've continued that. And so if you're in an environment, you can do that, keep doing it. If it's somewhere, you just want to say, right, I live in the middle of the city, I just love to go into the mountains, then go. But don't think you can just wander off into the middle of nowhere and you'll be absolutely fine. You've got to look at things like weather forecasting. You've got to consider nature, your route. Can you navigate well? Do you know the area? Does it have any particular restrictions? And that's where sometimes in your early life, getting some guiding assistance could be good. A little bit of training always helps. And then as you start to learn, you can then say, right. And the greatest thing is get some friends. Go with some friends and share the experience together. You cannot be too prepared to be on a mountain. And I work with dozens of people, and I also work in education and in business over in the UK and in Europe. And the number of people I see who just are not prepared for what they're doing, and that just could be a day at school. It could be the way they go to work. If you can prepare properly, it takes so much pressure off your life. And on a mountain, you have to be prepared. We have to have not only just equipment ready to go, we have to have ourselves ready to go. We have to look at things, I say, like weather forecasting. Are we going to go or not? And these make immense changes on a mountain or any kind of big trip. If you haven't got, if you turn up and you've forgotten to take any food, it's not going to last very long. As a friend of mine recently did in Antarctica, they packed all the food, but they packed it wrong. So instead of having 10 or 7 menus, 1 to 7, 1 to 7, 1 to 7, so your day changed, which is so much smoother. You can just make whatever you're doing so much smoother and less stressful for everybody.
That's so funny, yeah. Just even, like you said, just even a meal be in the wrong order can be, when you're in that situation, be a bigger deal than you think. Well, it's not a big deal. But it could be, right?
But you've only got to see somebody in a restaurant who said, I didn't order that. And you can just see the heads, they're all just exploding across the table. Somebody put salad and I didn't ask for salad. And it's just, oh, please, it's a meal, you're fine. But yeah, food's an important thing on any kind of trip. It's imperative. We burn a lot of energy.
That's good. Preparation, that's good. That's a good message for us. I want to go back to, you said, hey, I'm a mountaineer, but I'm scared of heights. How do you manage that fear and work through that? And I find that interesting. And how you manage that being up on the mountain?
I'm very safe, perhaps a little bit too safe. We take risks on mountains. Don't get me wrong, but we don't take silly risks. Most of us. So it may be that, look, I know I've got to do this route tomorrow. I've seen it the evening before. I've been looking at my binoculars. I can see up the mountain. It looks a bit interesting. Okay, we'll see how we go tomorrow. And I might just be a little bit slower. I am with my feet anyway now because of losing the toes. But it could be I'm just going to do something slightly different, or I've just got to get my head straight. It's down to that preparation again. Nigel, you're absolutely fine. There's nothing dangerous going on up here. Just keep walking. And it might just be a small area, 20 feet. You go to the other end and you think, so what was the problem? But you've got to get past that 20 feet. And so what I do mentally is I just prepare myself for it, knowing if anybody's rappelled or abseiled, most people will know you go off a rope off the edge of a building, sometimes for charity, or off the side of a mountain. The worst piece is getting your backside over the edge and lowering. When you're on the rope, it's fine. So it's just going, I know that's not going to be nice. I know I'm not going to like it. Do you know what? It's not killed me yet. Just get your backside over the edge. And once you've done that, it's a joy. You just go down the rope, it's lovely. But it's getting past that initial piece that lots of people won't. And that's where my mental preparation comes in.
That's good. I've actually been doing something with I played sports a lot growing up. So I a recent thing I was telling myself, basically to get things going. I said, "Come on, Jason, get in the game. Just start the game, and you're gonna be okay."
Give yourself a good talking to. You'll be fine. Come on, get out there. Yep, it works every time.
All right, now that's awesome. Why don't you bring us up to today? What goes on? Are you still doing adventures? You mentioned that this has led to some other things, and maybe teaching, speaking. Why don't we hear about where you're at today?
Well, I'm still doing adventures. I've got a number planned for next year. Slightly different. I'm still doing some mountaineering, but I've also been asked to do a mountain bike race across South Africa, which will be different. But through my adventures, I've met some really good friends across the world. And so we meet up every so often and do different things. So it doesn't have to be mountaineering. We'll go and do a rock climb, or we'll go and do a trail or whatever. And we'll just pick unusual things. So there's plenty of that coming up for next year. I've got to get in training over the winter here in the UK. But I'm doing lots of speaking, and I do majority of my speaking in education, purely for a number of things. Adventure is now on the curriculum in the United Kingdom. So they actually, and again, as we've talked about before, it's okay as a teacher to say, well, here's a video and here's a picture. Oh, and here's the guy himself, because you have much more effect on people as an individual on the stage again. So I've got quite a lot of that coming up, and I love inspiring children, because I think if we can inspire generations younger than us to come up, we have an enormous possibility to make them do something with their lives, or give them the opportunities to do something with their lives. So if I can inspire a 10-year-old or a 15-year-old that actually my life really isn't boring or that bad, or as I say to a lot of them, you have wonderful ideas, but you just don't do anything with them, or you don't think you have the opportunity. You've got to go and find it, because nobody will give it to you. And I still get the odd message now and again from parents going, literally one lady, in fact, sent me a message, "What have you done to my child?" And I thought at first, what have I done? And apparently the daughter went home and has since been traveling the world, joined the forces, gone out and done exciting things. And apparently they're telling me the pivotal moment was when I talked to them at school. And it really was that. Run home through the door, "Mum, I'm going to do this with my life." Parent probably going completely pale at this point, thinking, "Oh, it would never happen." Well, it did. And if we can inspire youngsters, I think that's very powerful.
Yeah, that's a beautiful story, because it's really, as I'm into so into stories, it's your story intersecting with someone else's, and they're thereby changing theirs and their path because they've heard yours. What is a common, or maybe a common or reaction that kids give to you when you show them your fingers and your hands, and what is their reaction to that?
When I do younger children, their eyes just pop out of their heads. They think it's absolutely hilarious. And then I actually show full pictures of my injuries. When I was in hospital, I was lucky enough to work with a medical photographers, so I have high quality images of my feet and hands and such. And then, of course, what tends to happen is they don't believe I haven't got toes, so I end up taking my shoes and socks off, and I show them I haven't got toes. And that's a similar one. The fact is that we have a lot of preconceptions set into us through life, as in, if you don't have toes, you can't walk. And as I'll say to them, the only people that tell you that are the people with toes. What I'm trying to do is break their cycle of, I believe everything everybody tells me, or I don't go and find out myself. And I think that's a big discovery thing. Go and learn. Go and find out for yourself. Go and break some of the ideas that people have told you that they don't understand. So go and look. But youngsters are great. Some of the teenagers think it's a bit crazy. I've had one or two faint. Including one school bully, of which the head teacher said your fee was worth just watching that one child fall over.
That's great.
The entire year now will not be bullied by this individual. But what I find, the younger pupils, the older ones want to come and talk with me afterwards. And they want to know, I've got this idea, what do you think? If I wanted to do that, do you know somebody I can talk to? Whether it be I'd like to have a go at mountaineering. Right, well, here's some details. Go and talk to these people. Go and find your journey. And that's the important thing. We can guide you, we can advise you, but you have got to go and find that journey.
Yeah, that's cool. And if people want to connect with you, bring you to speaking, is there a place where best to connect with you?
Two websites, mrfrostbite.com or nigelvardy.com. There's loads of details on both those sites. And the usual social networking stuff. Just type my name into Instagram, Twitter, all the usual things. You'll find me on there.
Okay. And we'll have those links on the website and on the show notes for the podcast, so guests can tap right into that. Well, Nigel's been great to hear a bit of your adventure, the lessons learned from that. And just really want to thank you for spending time here with us on StoryHinge.
No, it's a pleasure. Thank you very much for inviting me.
Right. Thank you all for being here. Thank you again for Nigel, for him spending time with us. If you want to connect with him, you can do so at nigelvardy.com or also mrfrostbite.com. You can find him there and also on many of the social sites. The links will be in the show notes and on the podcast website if you want to see that. A few thoughts before we close up here today. I love the concept that Nigel shared about being on the top of Mount McKinley and being in this life-threatening situation. And what do you do? And there's a cool concept in there. And he basically was shortening your horizon. He talked about how you don't look for, hey, how are we going to get out of this big obstacle before us? But you look at the next 10 minutes. What do I do for the next 10 minutes? What do I do for the next 15 minutes? And you shorten that horizon and just focus on what you can do. And I thought that was just a key concept when we have, this mountain before us that we are trying to accomplish. If we focus on that too much, sometimes we can freeze up and not know what to do, not know what the next step is. But if we shorten that horizon and say, okay, I don't know, and maybe that even comes down to, I don't know what I need to do for this full day today, but let me focus on what I can do for the next 15 minutes. What's the next task I need to get done? And just focus on that and do it. Or the next hour. And just keep moving forward that way. So, yeah, I thought that was really cool that you can have that same lesson and adventure on top of a mountain that we do in life in general. And I guess we've heard this in several different ways, but it goes along the concept of living out who you are. And I really found that in Nigel's story, and that this adventure is it feels like such a part of him and who he needs to be to express himself and to live fully. And that he's been able to incorporate that into his life. And, maybe it's not adventure for you. Maybe it's something else that you feel that's there that you just haven't gotten to do as much as you really know you want to. Or maybe you're distracted or where life has taken us in a different direction. And I just want to encourage us all to try to incorporate some of those things in our life. And it's really just also exploring in different areas so you learn more about yourself. And I found that very, very fulfilling in my own life. So a few thoughts there. Hope you guys are having a great week and continue to have a great week for these next few until we come back in a couple weeks. I want to thank you all for the support and the growth of the podcast that's been going on. I'm just coming up to 2 full years of doing StoryHinge at this time and look forward to year 3. There'll probably be some shifts again, as I seem to be doing every year here on StoryHinge. It started off in season 1 where I just wanted to hear people's stories. And then here in the second year, I've tried to focus down a little bit more on story itself and just curiosity about story and how we can be better at creating story. And that still has some of that, just hearing interesting people as well. And here in season 3 coming up in 2019, I think the shift is going to be more towards business and how businesses can utilize story and storytelling. So we'll still have some of the same flavor, but with probably a little bit more business focus. And I'll be telling you more about that as the months come by here. But again, thank you all. Please subscribe, share the podcast with others. Also invite you to check out the other podcasts that I'm doing with my brother, 73 Mentors. And that's the number 73 Mentors with no space. And you should be able to find that on any of the podcast apps out there. So that one's a little more in-depth, just my brother and I discussing the top most influential people who have ever lived. We've spent time with Plato, and we're still in Galileo. We'll be wrapping up Galileo over the next several weeks here. And moving on to Karl Marx as our next one. So there's some interesting discussion and eye-opening revelation in terms of these people and why they were so influential and what kind of lives they lived and what they contributed to the world we have today. You guys have a great one. We will catch you in a few. Ciao.